Hello and welcome to my studio. If you're a subscriber, welcome back. It's great to see you. And if you're new to the channel, I make inspirational videos and tutorials on all things stained glass, from designing, through to painting, through to making stained glass windows. I also bring you interviews with interesting and exciting glass artists. And today, it's my great pleasure to bring you an interview with Kirsty Brooks. She is a British architectural glass artist who works in the public realm developing artworks with communities. She uses a lot of archive footage, a lot of background research to develop in conjunction with the community a finished artwork. Her work is often notably monochrome or restricted colour palette, and she has a very unique and interesting style. If you are new to the channel, I would encourage you to subscribe because it does help me to develop my reach to other creatives who are interested in glass in the cultural context. I'm interested in building up a community of creatives who talk and discuss and share ideas about how best to use glass, as I say, in that cultural context. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Also, leave comments and suggestions for future artists whom you'd like me to interview. So without any further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hello, Kirsty. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, great. It's really nice to see you. Where are you today?
I'm in my office in my house, which is also the spare room where most of our books are. I have a studio up the road, which is also quite small, but most of my work is made by protostudios and pews in Wiltshire. So I have these various spaces that I use, and I can also use the equipment where I teach in Richmond. So sometimes I use the sandblaster or the kilns there. So yeah, I'm in random different places at any given time.
Fantastic. So I think what would be really helpful is to sort of wind back to your kind of early influences and maybe the things that you felt earlier on in your life led you down this wonderful sort of creative path that you're now on.
So I probably knew I wanted to be an artist when I was quite young. I was lucky enough to have a sister who went to art school who invented the idea of art school for me in my mind. She studied theatre design. I then went to Edinburgh, studied all the different types of glass, from glass blowing, kiln forming, stained glass. I also did painting as a second subject right through to my final year so that I could bring that influence in. So yeah, that's where it evolved. And I think at that stage I kind of knew that when people come to a medium from a slightly different place, they always bring that freshness and that focus that sometimes if you're just narrowly focused on one thing and you carry on, sometimes that can get a bit stale or a bit stiff, and when you bring new blood into a discipline, often there's some interesting things that happen. And I think when I left college and started working, I quickly realised that that was a complete luxury, to be able to play with anything and everything.
I think the old phrase of youth is wasted on the young was never truer than it was with me. I really didn't realize until I left art school what that opportunity was. The resources available, the options to kind of just explore and to play. I think you only kind of, well, for me anyway, I only came to the realization, I think towards the end of my sort of, in my final year, and I thought, actually, I should have done so much more, because there's so many opportunities when you're at art school, isn't there?
Yeah, but you're busy, discovering life and other subject matter, and
Exactly. You're trying to discover who you are. I was trying to learn how to cook without poisoning myself. That was the biggest challenge. So after art school, there was a period of time traveling. What happened next? How did you develop from there?
I did a couple of commissions, stained glass commissions, which were okay, but I realised that although I'd come out of college thinking, oh, I can do this, hooray, let's have an interesting life, I really realised that there were aspects that I hadn't fully got under my belt. So I thought I need to work for someone else to learn, general business practice, how to measure things properly, how to price things properly, always difficult. I've always done interesting projects on the side, but I've always been doing commissions, and I apply for commissions and sometimes things come to me, sometimes I get repeat work through different companies, so it varies. Always on the hustle though for a new commission.
Absolutely. Well, I think the life of a glass artist is a precarious life at the best of times. It's a little bit of a tightrope, isn't it? And you're often only as good as your most recent project, because occasionally, as you say, clients will come back to you, but usually we're creating one-offs, aren't we? Where you kind of build up a relationship with a client, you go through the whole sort of process with them. It concludes with a public art piece, and that's the interaction finished then, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And there's often a kind of period of mourning where you're so immersed in a project, and then when it finishes, you don't get to work with that team of people, you don't get to look at that subject matter anymore, you have to move on. So you do get used to it, and some projects only last about 6 months, but typically they last a year or two. So yes, it's a strange existence, but very interesting.
So when you say some of them last for a year or two, are we talking about residencies here?
No, commissions actually. So the one I did for St John's College at Oxford University was a 2-year project. I think it was only meant to be a year, but it got quite involved. The research was a very long period, and it was a very complex piece. So they had said at the beginning, we don't have a specific time scale, but we'd like it done sometime in the next year or two.
Do you find it's when I say recent, it's a relatively recent phenomenon, the idea of community engagement? I mean, community engagement in public art is well established now, but I remember a time when really artists were often commissioned simply on the basis of their own work, and they almost just dropped a piece of art into an environment without this sense of this journey and this dialogue, which you're now talking about. Do you sense that has developed maybe in the last 10, 15 years, this idea of going on a journey with a community and kind of letting that organically evolve through to a finished piece?
Yeah, definitely. In a way, I don't think it's really acceptable to unleash your creative ideas on someone without consulting them. I'm always really aware that although I create something, I install it and then potentially I never see it again, but the people that have to live with it have to see it every single day. So there's that real responsibility that comes with that. You're never going to get everyone to agree on the quality or the aesthetics of something, but if you take them along on the journey, they will buy into why you're doing what you're doing. I do a fair amount of community consultation, not always. There's always some interesting stories that you find out when you do those kind of community engagements.
And looking at your art, it certainly seems to me that you have a wonderful ability to have an oblique view on a community that you're looking at, and you kind of find a way of unlocking that community, not by sort of directly representing the most obvious image or collection of images. You kind of almost go, you look round the corner and you try and get a story that's maybe not the most obvious story to tell.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's just, it's mainly related to the perverseness of my character. I don't like to do anything that anyone expects me to do. I'm difficult like that. Also, I think, as artists, we're always struggling to do something original, and often the obvious story has already been told, or it's in the minds of the locals anyway. So it's always nice if you can show them something about where they live that perhaps they haven't heard about for a long time, or it's forgotten. It's an urge that I have not to do the obvious. I can't help it. But yeah, you're right. It's about looking around corners and picking up on the unexamined details and then blowing them up to 5 meters high, and people go, blimey, what's that? And I say, well, it's down there, and it's actually this big.
So is that, do you see that as part of the function of public art? I mean, the whole idea of public art is an interesting one, because different people have different views on it. Some people feel it just needs to be a piece of ornamentation, in the plaza, the sculpture in the plaza. But others, and I'm feeling that you're a little bit like that, is that you really want to kind of reflect the community back at itself by showing it perhaps facets of itself that it hadn't quite been aware of.
Absolutely. I'm really interested in people and people's stories. And at one point I thought I'm going to study social anthropology and ethnomusicology. I didn't. I went to art school, but I am interested in this sense of what makes a place. Why do people choose to live there? There's a story for everyone as to why they're there. You know, it might be work, it might be relationships, it might be they've never left, it's where they're from, they feel rooted. And I'm interested in how people relate to landscape and urban environments. And yeah, I suppose that comes through in my work in a way.
And do you see yourself as a visual storyteller? Is that how you see yourself?
Yeah, I think that's only come to the fore in more recent years. I suppose storytelling has so many connotations, and because I'm often going down a slightly abstract route, perhaps people don't pick up on the story. I like to make work that will reveal itself over time. You know, essentially I'm a communicator. I like people, I like finding out about things, and that comes through in my work. I've learned over the years actually that I'd rather just show someone one design because they'll probably want the one that you don't want them to have. So,
I know that's the problem. You've got a favorite. Everybody has a favorite. You know, you're presenting one or two, maybe three designs, and you'll think, choose this one, and they'll choose another one, and you have to sort of go, oh right. You know,
good choice.
Well, it's a difficult one because it isn't just about your own personal choice, is it? As you say, they are having to live with the piece, and they're coming to the whole process with expectations that they're expecting you to fulfill, and you might not. Obviously, through discussion and dialogue, you get a sense of what their expectations are, what their hopes and aspirations are, but ultimately, as an artist, you've got your own mind's eye view of what is the perfect fit, and sometimes there's a little bit of friction between that and what the client's mind's eye view of what the perfect fit is. How do you resolve that?
In more recent times, I've been able to be stronger and say, I'm giving you this one design because I believe that's the route we should go down, but at the end of the day they're paying for it. They have to live with it. Why should your artistic ego get in the way of something that they have commissioned?
I think what's interesting as well, as a sort of an artist working to commission, is that you've got an idea of a path that you want to go on, but you need the participation of clients in order to facilitate that. And it is like stepping stones. You want to get across from point A to point B, but you do it through commission after commission, and that's working with individual groups. And it is this collaboration between their expectation and your expectation, and somehow you kind of have to navigate in the direction of travel that you want to go, because ultimately you've got to be able to live with your artwork as well and be pleased and happy with it. So it's an interesting set of sort of values that you have to juggle with all the time. I think you learn as well from all of the projects that you do, and I certainly find that almost always, without exception, when the client makes a suggestion of an alteration to a design, it's actually improved the design. It's actually made it better because you can get to the point where you don't see the wood for the trees. You're so kind of fixated on something that you see in your mind's eye that is maybe not being seen in the same way by everyone else. And so that collaboration is always a good thing, and it's always nice to kind of be flexible enough to sort of accommodate. Because I think at the end of the day, it makes for better art.
I did a project for the Institute of Art Design and Technology in Dunleary in Ireland, and interestingly, that was one of the only projects where I wasn't able to have any say in how it was made, so that the artwork could do its thing, but it should look as if it was absolutely embedded in the architecture. But what was interesting about that project is we had a really interesting series of discussions about the role of public art, the role of the front of a building, what it should say. But the final result did work well with the architecture. The client was happy, the architect was happy, hopefully the students were happy. So yeah, it all worked out well in the end. About 15 years ago, I did a project for the Grand Opera House in Belfast, which involved designing some balustrades which were in the new extension. And that was a design competition where the brief was quite open, but I came up with the idea quite quickly. I thought, wouldn't it be fun if on the balustrades we printed images of people performing on the stage? I did some research in the Linen-Hall Library in Belfast and found a lot of really interesting archive photos. So I created a collage that represented a 96-year performance history. And so I was able to combine those images, layer them on top of each other. So you almost had a kind of ghostly series of images. When we made the project and it was installed, I did put some masking tape spots on the other side and got people to line up with it. And I met a lovely lady called Betty McIlwain, who had performed on the stage in the 1950s. And she was an older lady by this point. She came with her daughter. I put the masking tape spot on the floor and got her to stand next to her own legs. So it was her in 2006 next to, I think, 1959 version of her. And then we took a photo from the other side. But it was really lovely to see people kind of laughing and looking at each other from across the atrium space. So it was quite a social piece, which was interesting. And because it paid homage to the history of the place and the life and all the performances that had gone on in that space, I think everyone really enjoyed it. So it was called Treading the Boards, because the idea was, you know, what would happen if all the people who had ever performed in that space got together and had a giant performance party. And in a way, that atrium space where people go in the interval is quite social. So that was the idea behind that.
Well, Kirsty, this has been a wonderful time with you. I've learned a lot about your approach to public art, which I think is really fascinating. The fact that you do a lot of research and you dig deep into archives and you try and reflect a society or a group or a community back on itself in a slightly more oblique way, that I find very fascinating. So we can find out more about your work through Access. You have a website there. Are you also on social media?
Yeah, I've got a couple of Instagram accounts, one where I'm attempting to be more professional, always a struggle. And I have one which is more like a series of sketchbook ideas and random thoughts. And actually in a way, that one is the most interesting to me because I use it almost like a sketchbook where I go back to ideas, I spot something, and then I often find if I feel the urge to share it, then it's an idea that I'm excited about, and sometimes I go back to that. But that one's that is at Brooks Thinks, and the other one is Kirsty Brooks Artist with some underscores in between.
Well, I will put the links to your Instagram accounts in the comments below, and I will put links to your AXA website also in the links below, so people can check out your work and follow your progress. Kirsty, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's been really enjoyable, and I wish you every good fortune for the year ahead and all the projects that we've yet to complete.
You too.
All the best.